Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insight through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Today on the show, I'd like to welcome Linda Griffin, who is a published author, keynote speaker, and writing and self-publishing coach who teaches coaches, consultants, and other professionals how to capture their wisdom in a book, making it accessible to more people who can benefit from it. In the process, her clients increase their authority and thought leadership position in their chosen market. Linda also developed the Author Fast Track program based on her experience in writing and publishing a book. She takes people from idea to book in hand in as few as 90 days. Wow. Oh my gosh. We have so much to talk about here. Welcome.
Thank you, Summer. I am so excited to be here.
That is amazing. But before we jump into the whole professional aspect of your background, let's take a little bit of time to learn about you and your personal journey. So just give us a soundbite of where you came from, your experiences, and what might have influenced you to be where you're at today.
Yeah, sure. Would love to. So I am a techie at heart. From an early age, I like to put together puzzles and I like to solve mysteries. And my early experience with Nancy Drew gave me a lifelong love of mystery stories, which I still have today. And when I was a math major in college, and I joined a technology company. So for most of my lifetime, I have worked in bits and bytes. And I laugh and say, how did I get from bits and bytes to talking words? So I'm now using my right brain in addition to my left brain.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a fairly large family with 4 kids and went off to college and enjoyed that thoroughly. And then I moved around a lot. I joined a corporate company, a Fortune 500 company, and moved around a lot. So I've traveled a lot, love to travel, still love to travel, and got a lot of experience in a lot of different areas. And then when I left my corporate job and started my own marketing company, that became the start of my journey of becoming a book coach.
Oh my gosh. Well, this is so interesting because you talk about bits and bytes, right? And you being a math whiz. Oh my gosh. And I just got off a live just minutes before I came on with you, and it was about striving and thriving, but it was also about the story.
Yes.
And here's the thing, as a mathematician, as a math major, in numbers, there was a story for you.
Yes. It's funny because I see numbers in everything, really. Numbers to me are like a language almost.
They are. It is a language.
Yeah, it is a language. It is a language. And there's so much in nature that is related to math, so much in music that's related to math. In fact, music is really just mathematics, right? So, and a lot of people are fearful of that because I think they make it overly complicated. Everything in math is pretty much a formula. Right. And once you figure out the formula, then you can figure out the thing.
Right.
But it can be intimidating. And I do understand that. And it's funny because when I was in college, certain types of people gravitate towards math, the nerds, if you will. And I just remember in college having one professor in one of my later college classes. He never spoke, right? He did not speak the entire semester. He wrote on the board. He would write down the lessons. He would write down what you were supposed to do. He never spoke. And that's kind of the stereotypical, non-socialized, if you will, individual. He was at the far extreme, let me put it that way.
Oh my, yes.
Yeah.
You just wonder how somebody like that today could get along, you know, in a classroom setting. How interesting. I mean, because there are extremes, and I've written a book as well, and it's
Mm-hmm.
called F Yeah, Get Real with Strong Language. And the thing
Mm-hmm.
about it is we take the language and we specifically use that title because we didn't want to objectify the language. And in that book, I talk about different languages, one of those
Mm-hmm.
being math, one of those being
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's a physicist, one of those
Mm-hmm.
being me who's a psychologist, right? And
Right.
so we all have these different languages, and yet
Right.
that other language, the language that we might consider foul or cursing, or
Mm-hmm.
we don't objectify it because it's
Mm-hmm.
free to everybody.
Yes, right.
It is not, elitist, where
Right.
other languages such as that in our professions can
Yes.
be considered somewhat elitist because not
Yes.
everybody's privy to it.
Right. That's right. That's
Right.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
But yet
Yeah.
math is such a unique experience because we go through school and we have to learn it. And you're right.
Right.
There is a lot of fear. I had a lot of fear in relation
Right.
to math. I think I feared math more than I would the dentist any day.
I believe it. I believe it. And, and then so people put up a mental block against it. It's, they're kind of their own worst enemy because they have such a fear of it. And then that feeds on itself. So then they can't become successful with it at all. But yeah, quite an interest, quite interesting.
I love that. But yet for you, and I say this because you've transitioned into helping others write books, but you've used the idea of stories and how to put that together and creating a formula, so to speak, to write a book. And
Absolutely. Yes. I
it.
created a formula because, again, and this is where the marriage, if you will, of my mathematics and computer science background meets this creative and artistic endeavor of writing. Because yes, everybody's story is different and the way they want to share that story is different. Some people do a signature process as an example, or some people do a memoir, or some people do a how-to book. So it's all different depending on what the message is and what the wisdom is that you want to share with the world. But what I've done is I've taken that mathematics background and created a step-by-step process. So that framework is underneath everything that we do, and it allows the client to just relax then and worry about the knowledge that's in their head as opposed to the mechanics of getting it done.
I absolutely love that because we as human beings are very multidimensional and we function very differently from one another.
Yes.
Yet when we come to somebody like you, who is a coach, a book coach, and you have a formula set up, it's so much easier many times, even with our diverse backgrounds, to put in and place into that formula the things that we need to put there. It makes it so much easier. Right.
Yes.
And so I love that because, again, the way you explain that, I wish they would have explained this to me years ago in math.
Yes.
Right. Because it was so obscure to me many times. And even though I knew there was a formula, I'm like, I just don't get it because you, I didn't have a professor who only wrote on the board, but professors who just didn't tell the story very well.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so I couldn't use that side of my brain quite as well as maybe you did because you got the stories because there was a formula, right? And you were just that person to attach to those formulas earlier on than me.
Yeah.
So,
but I'll tell you, it was not an easy transition for me. I think you and I talked before about my journey to becoming an author and coming from someone who is used to working with bits and bytes and really struggling. Because I knew what I wanted to say. I knew what I wanted to share, but then to make it coherent so that someone else reading it would understand it. I'll tell you, when I finished my first draft, I cried because I read it and I thought, oh my goodness, this is not what I envisioned in my head. There were places where I had repeated things, there were things that I left out that weren't really clear because I understood them, but someone else reading it wouldn't understand it. And so it was definitely a journey for me. And I shared with you that the reason I wrote that book was to launch it at an industry conference. And that was where the 90 days came from, because I only had 90 days to get that book finished, right?
Wow.
And be able to launch it there at the conference. So that's why I can empathize with my clients, because I've been there, right? I know how difficult it is to juggle both your personal life, your work life, and then writing this thing called a book, right?
Right. So, I'm going to take a step back here really quickly, because I do want you to answer this particular question. How did you make the jump of working in the corporate arena to entrepreneurship? Because it seems like, where'd you get that aha moment? This is what I want to do. How did you do it?
Well, I was in a position where I had great success in my corporate career, but I thought, there's got to be something more than this. I'm not one who likes to take orders all the time. And I'm thinking, it'd be great if I could just be my own boss, right? And I know a lot of people go into entrepreneurship because of that. But I knew I had skills, right? Because of my marketing background. But what I didn't understand is, when I was in corporate, I had a whole ecosystem that supported me. I had an assistant, I had a tech team, I had, people who did sales. And then when I went out on my own, all of a sudden, it was me. I was wearing all of the hats. And that was a true culture shock. The other culture shock for me was, when I put my corporate business card on the table in front of someone, I had instant credibility. When I put my business card on the table as a solopreneur, they were like, "Who are you again? And what do you do?" So building that identity, that brand identity, I think was a big learning curve for me. The way I left corporate, it wasn't that big of a decision, in the sense that I felt I had accomplished everything that I could accomplish in that particular role. And I was just looking around for something else to do. Now, I did start looking before I left corporate. I tried a few things. I investigated some things online, and I really enjoyed the idea of coaching, because I'm a helper. I like to help people. And so I knew I wanted to do some form of coaching. And then I started looking around to say, what would that look like for me? So even before I left my corporate job, I did get certified at that time as a life and career coach, right? Because that was what I knew. And I started out coaching other professional women, because I was successful in a technology environment, which is very male dominated. And so I did that for a while, but it just was not the thing that really got my energy flowing the way I wanted it to.
Yeah.
And I then started, so I've had this like checkered entrepreneurial journey.
Right.
So I then started coaching other small business owners just like myself, solopreneurs, because again, I could take that corporate knowledge that I gained and apply that to small businesses in a much more palatable format. And I did that for a while, but that also didn't do it for me, simply because I had to learn a new language every time I got a new customer. It was office products one week, it was accounting the next week. And that I felt like I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to specialize. And, nowadays everybody says, specialize, niche down. I didn't know those terms at the time. I just knew that for me, I needed to focus on some specific area. And as I mentioned, because I love to travel, I decided to go with the travel and hospitality industry, and bed and breakfast in particular. It's a smaller niche of the travel and hospitality industry. And they have a huge problem in that they're usually booked solid in the summertime in their high season. And then in their low season, they're either very low booked or they end up closing. And that was really the impetus to me writing that first book, was to solve the problem of how do I get, as they say, heads in beds, right, in my low season. And that was the impetus to writing that first book.
What a cool journey. I mean, really, you say you have a checkered journey. I think it's an evolution, right?
Yes.
And so you've evolved, and yet you continue to, I don't want to use the word pivot, but you re-strategized. And we do that as entrepreneurs. And some of the two of the key words that stood out to me too is or three: brand identity,
Mm-hmm.
the ecosystem,
Mm-hmm.
and your specialty.
Yes.
Those are such important aspects of entrepreneurship. And we
Yes.
do not realize when we start out what our ecosystem is going to look like or not
Yes.
look like, because we do come from these corporate arenas, right?
Yes.
So I've come from an arena of working in hospitals, and we've got the secretary, and we've got the people doing the assessments, and you're overseeing and managing and doing all this stuff. And when you're an entrepreneur, it's like, I do my own calendar. I do my own marketing.
Right.
I do my own branding. I do my, how am I going to juggle all of this? And that is a strategy.
Yes.
And then on top of that, how do you do the direct service at the same time?
Yes. Right. Right. And what I've learned, Summer, is that you, as you said, you have to build that ecosystem, whether that is hiring people to work directly for you or building a team of freelancers who you can call upon that have specialties that can help you with that. I mean, one thing I will say about my journey is I was not afraid to keep re-strategizing what I wanted to do. I think that's the mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs make, and then they end up not being happy because they pick something and then they feel like they have to stick with it no matter what. They just force themselves to stick with that. And even though I took a lot of jokes from my friends saying, well, what business are you in this month, Linda?
Right.
But for me, it was like, no, I'm searching for what is going to fit for me. And I just was not afraid to keep pivoting, as you said, or changing, or slightly adjusting my path until I found the thing that I really love doing and can't imagine doing anything else.
And I love that about your journey and what you're bringing up here, in that even though you may have had this formula, and the formula may be similar, right? From specialty to specialty, but you figured out what it was that you were really passionate about, and then still had that formula, kind of tweaked it a little bit, and yet you were able to do something that you loved. And here you are today doing something that you're passionate about, that's going to have longevity because you are passionate about. And I do get it. I do get, hey, Linda, what are you up to this week? Right?
Yes,
because
right. Yes.
Because even I've gotten that. Hey, what are you up to this week?
Yes.
What are you, but I know in the core of me, just like you, you like to help people.
Yes.
And it's figuring out a way of doing that really aligns with your passion, your values, your integrity, all of that, and your skill set.
Yes.
And so here you are, like you said, you're building up that ecosystem, right? Whether they're entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, contractors that are helping support your business, your ecosystem, you're creating your brand, you're expanding. If you don't follow her, I suggest anybody follow her. Her name's Courtney L. Sanders. And I just watched, and she's a coach, and I just watched one of her videos the other day about specialties.
Yes.
And specializing and niching, right? And so it's like, it's so important, because she said there's a lot of life coaches.
Yes.
But as I was going through LinkedIn, Instagram, all these different, I began to realize, like, there's a manifesting coach, there's a coach, and it's so important. If you think, or if you're scared because you think you're going to pull down your demographic, you're not. Actually, it's going to open it up. You're going to be amazed.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah, I say that to people as they are thinking about the audience for their book, because the tendency is, well, my book is for everyone. Well, no, it isn't, because if it's for everyone, then it's for no one. So you want to hone in on your target audience. Who is, if I always tell people, think about if you were just having a conversation with someone, who would that person be? What would they look like? Such that that's how you write your book. You write to that one person. And that way you attract all the people that fit that category, right? Because if you don't, then as you said, it all becomes generic. It's like, well, it's a leadership book. Well, okay, so what? But if it's a leadership book for corporate women, then it's more specialized. And I know, okay, that's for me. I know that book is going to speak to me directly.
Yeah, I love that, because that applies to what you're doing as helping somebody publish a book as a coach. that can be applied to so many different aspects of life. And I think, as you said, if you write to everybody, you're writing to nobody, right? And so I just love that. That is so unique, and just that was like, yep, that makes sense. That absolutely makes sense. So tell us a bit about your coaching and how you help people publish their book.
Sure. Well, I help people self-publish. There's nothing wrong with traditional publishing, but the problem for first-time authors is in these days, it's very difficult to get a book contract because there's only about 5 big publishing houses right now, and they want their authors to already come with an established platform, tens of thousands of followers, perhaps a show, a podcast such as yourself, and so because they don't want to have to take a chance on an unknown. And so I usually work with authors who don't have a huge platform already, but are looking to establish or increase that platform, right? And they come to me in a couple of different ways. Some come with just an idea. Hey, I've always wanted to write a book, but I'm not really sure what to write it about. And we hone in, just as we were talking a few minutes ago, what is the thing? What is the big idea that you want to share with the world? And then we focus the book in on that. And some people come to me with a manuscript that's already partially written, and they say, hey, I'm stuck. This thing has been on my hard drive for 2 years and I don't know what to do with it. And so I help them get it from that stage all the way through the end of publishing. As you said, in my intro, I like to take people from idea to book in hand, and I meet them where they are. And we do it with a standardized process so that there's no surprises. And within that, there's flexibility for the individual then to make the book look however they want to, because, ultimately, I want them to be happy with the end product.
Oh, I love that. Let me ask you a question, and this is just on a side note, and it's not on I'm going to go off script here. So when it comes to cover and back cover, do you contract with somebody, or do you?
Yes.
Oh, God. Okay.
I absolutely. I contract with someone to do a professional cover. And I'll tell you, it's really important to have someone who is a book cover designer, because I had a client that worked with a graphic designer, lots of great graphic designers, but he wasn't a book cover designer. And there's some guidelines that, the title should be a certain size, the author's name should be a certain size. So he had created this great cover, but it wasn't good for a book. Because, if you're on Amazon and you look at books, they're in a little thumbnail all you see is the front cover. And so if the colors aren't right so that it fades out, or the author's name isn't visible, that affects whether someone's going to click on that cover or not.
Oh, absolutely. I fully agree with you there. Now, let's jump to the next question. You have a very unique author fast track program.
Yes.
Tell us about this program.
Yes. So the author fast track program, as I said, you can write your book in as little as 90 days. Now, I will say, to do that, you must be motivated, okay?
Yeah.
Because it's not for the faint of heart, and you must make it your top priority. But it can be done. It can be done. Usually my clients take more like 6 months to do it because they're juggling family, they're juggling their business responsibilities and other things that they might be doing. So the average of my clients takes about 6 months, which is still really good, because if you get a traditional publishing contract, it's 24 months is the average of how long it takes you to get from your idea to your book, because you have to fit into their engine, right? And their system and all of that. Of course, there's advantages to getting a publishing contract because of the distribution and that kind of a thing. But I tell people, if you self-publish, it doesn't mean you can't get picked up by a big publishing house. And in fact, there are several authors who have done that. They've gotten very successful self-publishing, and then they caught the notice of a big publishing house and got a publishing contract. I think the woman who did The Art of Tidying Up, I can't think of her name.
Marie Kondo.
Yeah. She originally self-published, and then because the book was so successful, got picked up by a huge publishing house, and has now gone on to do even bigger and better things. So yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think that once you get the exposure right?
Yes.
That you
Yes.
need. And there are book publishing days on Twitter. There
Yes.
are where,
Yes.
the publishing houses come out and look at what you have to offer, look at your ideas. So you absolutely can translate that book over from self-published to being published with a bigger publishing house. And there, like you said, there are those big five, right?
Yes.
And what's nice about self-publishing is, okay, the reality is many of us aren't going to get picked up by those big five right off the bat. I have friends who are authors multiple times over, and yet they're still working towards either that or just being a really great self-published author, which they are. They're tremendous, and they're making a great living. And And here's the other thing with self-publishing, you get ownership over your material.
Yes, that's a big piece of it. That's right. You have the right. You continue to own the rights to your book, and so you get all of the royalties associated with that, as opposed to really 10 cents on the dollar, which is what you get with a big publishing house. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I love what you're doing here. You've got such a great story. I love your formula application to helping others publish a book. And then also this author fast track program.
Yes.
We've covered so much here in regards to your personal background, your professional background, some strategy. So as we come to the close of the interview, my last question is, if you were to leave the listeners with some words of wisdom today, what would they be?
I would say find the one person that you want to help, right? And look at what is the biggest problem that they have, and then help them solve it. And then you can solve that in so many different ways with your programs. You can solve it by writing a book that addresses that problem. You can solve it with group coaching. There's so many ways that you can solve that problem. But I think if you can hone in on who the person is that can benefit the most from your wisdom, and then how you can help them, that's golden.
Oh, love those words of wisdom. And thank you so much, Linda, for being on the Core Women podcast with me today.
Thank you so much, Summer. It was my pleasure.
Absolutely. You can connect and follow Linda Griffin on LinkedIn and Twitter, and at 90 Day Author on Instagram, as well as expertauthor411.com.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women, and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.